The book of Judges contains one of the most famous refusals of power in all of biblical history. But right beneath that public refusal, a much darker, hidden ambition was quietly taking root. The story begins with a triumph. The judge Gideon has just delivered Israel from the massive, overwhelming army of the Midianites. The people of Israel are thrilled. They are exhausted from years of oppression, and they are desperate for permanent security. So, they come to Gideon with an unprecedented offer. They do not just ask him to lead, they offer him a dynasty. In Judges chapter 8, verse 22, they say, "Rule over us, you, your son, and your grandson." Gideon gives what sounds like the perfect spiritual answer. He replies, "I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." It sounds like the ultimate surrender, a triumph of deep humility. He recognizes that Israel is not supposed to have a human king. God alone is their sovereign. But the biblical text does not let us stop there. The narrative immediately begins to show us a man who publicly rejected the crown, but privately began to build a throne. Almost in the very next breath, Gideon asks the people for a favor. He asks for the gold rings they took as plunder from the defeated army. The people gladly hand over a massive fortune in gold. Gideon takes this wealth and fashions it into an ephod. An ephod was a sacred garment worn by the high priest to seek the will of God, but Gideon does not send it to the tabernacle. He sets it up in his own hometown of Ophrah. The text tells us that all Israel prostituted themselves by worshiping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. He had just refused the political crown, but he immediately set up his own rival religious center, drawing the devotion of the people directly to his own house. And the pattern does not stop there. Judges chapter 8 goes on to describe his lifestyle. The text notes that Gideon had many wives, and he fathered 70 sons. In the ancient Near East, this is not just a detail about a large family. A massive harem was the ultimate status symbol of an absolute monarch. It was how kings made alliances and displayed their unmatched wealth and power. Gideon was building a royal court in everything but name. He lived like a king. He was treated like a king. He held the wealth of a king. But the final, devastating proof of his hidden ambition is found in a single word. Gideon had a concubine living in the city of Shechem. She bore him a son, and Gideon gave this boy a very specific name. The name was Abimelech. In ancient Hebrew, names were not just labels. They were declarations. The name Abimelech is made of two Hebrew words. Abi means my father, and Melech means king. My father is king. The man who stood before the crowds and piously declared, "I will not rule over you," looked at his newborn son and named him, "My father is king." It is a staggering contradiction. You do not give a child that name unless you believe it to be true. Gideon's public humility was a mask. His private ambition was the reality, and that hidden ambition planted a very dangerous seed. Gideon lived out the rest of his days in comfort. He enjoyed all the privileges of the throne without ever taking the official title. But he left behind a son who carried the title in his very name. A son who had grown up in the shadow of 70 half-brothers, watching the hypocrisy of his father. Gideon's hidden pride was about to become Abimelech's public obsession. And the moment Gideon died, that dark seed of ambition would grow into a nightmare for all of Israel. Gideon is dead. And the moment he is buried, the illusion of peace in Israel begins to fracture. He leaves behind 70 legitimate sons, 70 men who share the bloodline of the great judge, 70 potential leaders. But God does not call any of them to rule, and Israel does not crown them. They exist in a dangerous space. They possess the prestige of their father, but they hold no actual authority. But there is one son who refuses to stay in the shadows. Abimelech does not wait for a divine calling. He does not seek the presence of God. He does not go to the tabernacle. He does not wait for the Spirit to fall upon him the way it fell upon the judges before him. Instead, he goes to Shechem. Shechem was not just any city. It was a place with deep, ancient roots in the biblical story. It was where Abraham first built an altar, in the Promised Land. It was where Joshua gathered the tribes to renew the covenant. But by the time of Judges chapter 9, Shechem has become something else entirely. It is a city heavily influenced by Canaanite culture, a place where the worship of Yahweh has been mixed with the worship of local gods. More importantly, Shechem is the hometown of Abimelech's mother. And this is where Abimelech makes his move. He gathers his uncles, his mother's relatives, and the leading men of the city. He does not present a theological vision for the nation. He does not offer a plan to protect Israel from foreign armies. He offers them a political calculation. He asks them a simple, venomous question. Which is better for you? That all 70 of Gideon's sons rule over you, or that just one man rules over you? Remember, I am your flesh and blood. Notice what he is doing. He is weaponizing identity. He ignores the fact that God is supposed to be their king. He bypasses the rest of the nation. He appeals directly to local grievance and tribal loyalty. He convinces the men of Shechem that his 70 half-brothers are a threat to their autonomy. He sells them the idea that true security is found in elevating one of their own, not a divine calling, a political deal. It works. The text tells us that the hearts of the citizens of Shechem were inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, "He is our brother." But a political campaign requires funding, and the way Shechem funds Abimelech reveals the spiritual rot at the center of this new kingdom. The leaders of the city go into the temple of their god, Baal Berith. The name means Lord of the Covenant. It is a dark, tragic parody of Israel's covenant with Yahweh. They take 70 shekels of silver from this pagan treasury and hand it to Abimelech. 70 shekels. The number is not random. It is exactly the number of his half-brothers. The math of the text carries a grim foreshadowing. 1 shekel of silver for every life he intends to erase. This is not just a financial transaction. It is a spiritual one. The kingdom of Abimelech is being built on the wealth of a false god. And what does he do with the silver? He does not build an army of honorable men. He does not rally the tribes for defense. The Hebrew text says he used the money to hire men who were empty and reckless, mercenaries. Violent men who had no loyalties, willing to do whatever they were paid to do. The contrast is sharp. When God raises up a leader, he provides his spirit. When a man raises himself up, he has to buy violence. Abimelech now has the political backing of a major city. He has temple funding. He has a private, ruthless militia. The pieces are all in place. He is ready to seize the crown, but the shadow of his 70 half-brothers still hangs over him. As long as they breathe, his claim to the throne is vulnerable. To become the undisputed king, he cannot just win an election. He has to eliminate the final obstacle, all 70 of them. Abimelech does not wait. With 70 pieces of silver from a pagan temple, he hires his reckless militia, and he marches straight to his father's house in the city of Ophrah. Ophrah was supposed to be a place of deliverance. It was the very town where God first called Gideon to save Israel. It was where Gideon had famously torn down the altar of Baal. But now, it is the site of a massacre. The text in Judges chapter 9, verse 5, describes the scene with a chilling brevity. It says, Abimelech went to his father's house at Ophrah and murdered his brothers, the 70 sons of Jerubbaal, on one stone. Do not read past that phrase, on one stone. This was not a chaotic battle. It was not a random skirmish in the streets. To kill 70 men on a single stone means this was a public execution. It was systematic. It was dark and ritualistic. In the ancient world, altars were made of stone. When a covenant was made, or when God was worshipped, sacrifices were offered on a stone. Abimelech is taking the language of worship and twisting it into a nightmare. He is treating his own brothers as a sacrifice to the god of his own ambition. The 70 pieces of silver bought 70 lives, slaughtered one by one, in the very place where their father had once built an altar to Yahweh. It is a profound biblical picture of manufactured authority. When God establishes a true king, the king sacrifices himself for the people. When a man seizes power for himself, he sacrifices the people to secure his throne. Abimelech's kingdom begins exactly the way all false kingdoms begin, with the shedding of innocent blood. After the slaughter, the men of Shechem gather. They do not mourn the dead, they celebrate the victor. They assemble beside the great tree at the pillar in Shechem to crown Abimelech king. This, too, is a deliberate, tragic detail. Centuries earlier, Joshua had gathered all the tribes of Israel at Shechem. Under a great tree, Joshua set up a massive stone pillar as a witness to the covenant between Israel and God. He told the people to put away their false gods, declaring that Yahweh alone was their king. Now, in that exact same sacred spot, the men of Shechem crown a murderer. They take the geography of Israel's holy history and use it to inaugurate a tyrant. Abimelech finally has what his father secretly wanted and what his name always declared. He is king. The threat seems completely erased. The rivals are dead. The politicians are happy. The crown is secure. But human power always leaves a fracture. No matter how thorough the violence, a tyrant cannot control every variable. Abimelech thought he had killed all 70 of his brothers. But the text adds one small, devastating detail. One brother survived. Out of the 70, the youngest son managed to hide. His name was Jotham. Jotham has no army. He has no silver. He has no political backing. He is completely alone, a fugitive, running from a ruthless king. By all human logic, he is powerless. But in the biblical story, the one who escapes the slaughter is usually the one who carries the word of the Lord. Jotham does not run away into the desert to hide forever. Instead, he climbs to the top of Mount Gerizim, the mountain towering directly over the city of Shechem. And, looking down at the men who just crowned his brother's murderer, he raises his voice. He is about to deliver a message, a strange prophetic parable about trees. And it is a story that will ultimately bring the entire city to ashes. Jotham stands on the edge of Mount Gerizim, looking down at the men of Shechem who just murdered his 70 brothers. He does not threaten them with a rival army. He does not have one. Instead, he raises his voice and delivers a story. You can read it in Judges chapter 9, starting in verse 7. It is one of the oldest, most profound parables in all of Scripture, and it completely deconstructs the illusion of human power. Jotham tells the men of Shechem that one day, the trees of the forest went out to anoint a king for themselves. First, they go to the olive tree. They say, "Be our king." But the olive tree refuses. It asks, "Should I give up my oil, by which both gods and humans are honored, to hold sway over the trees?" So the trees go to the fig tree. "Come and be our king." But the fig tree also refuses. It asks, "Should I give up my fruit, so good and sweet, to hold sway over the trees?" Finally, they go to the vine. "Come and be our king." But the vine refuses too. It says, "Should I give up my wine which cheers both gods and humans to hold sway over the trees?" Pause and look at the pattern. The olive, the fig, and the vine are the most valuable, life-giving plants in the ancient land of Israel. They produce oil for light and healing. They produce fruit for nourishment. They produce wine for joy. But notice their shared response. They all realize that to become king, to spend their time swaying back and forth over the rest of the forest, would require them to stop producing fruit. The parable is making a devastating point about godly authority. The people who are actually producing life, the people who are actually doing the quiet, essential work of the kingdom, are rarely the ones desperate for political power. They are too busy bearing fruit. But the parable is not over. Desperate for a king, the trees finally turn to the lowest plant in the forest. They go to the bramble, the thorn bush. The bramble produces no fruit. It provides no timber. It is nothing but a nuisance, a tangled weed that chokes out life. The trees say to the bramble, "Come and be our king," and the bramble eagerly accepts. But its acceptance comes with a dark, twisted condition. The bramble says, "If you really want to anoint me king over you, come and take refuge in my shade. But if not, then let fire come out of the bramble and consume the cedars of Lebanon." It is a dark joke. A thorn bush has no shade. it grows close to the dirt. Taking refuge under a bramble only gets you torn up by thorns. But the threat is deadly serious. The bramble warns that if they do not submit perfectly, it will produce the only thing a dry thorn bush is good for: fire. Jotham is looking right at the leaders of Shechem. He is telling them exactly who they just crowned. Abimelech is the bramble. He has no spiritual fruit. He has no divine calling. He offers no real protection. He is a thorny, empty weed who will demand perfect loyalty. And the moment they cross him, he will burn them to the ground. Jotham finishes his warning, turns, and flees into the wilderness. He vanishes from the story. Down in the valley, Abimelech takes his throne. The blood is washed away. The silver is spent. The crown is secured. For 3 long years, Abimelech rules over Israel. And for 3 years, it seems like Jotham's prophecy was nothing but empty noise. The bramble is thriving. The fire has not come. But divine justice has not forgotten the 70 lives taken on one stone. God was simply waiting. For 3 years, it looks like Abimelech has gotten away with it. 3 years is a long time when you are holding power you stole. The blood on the stone at Ophrah has dried. The 70 pieces of silver have been spent. Jotham, the one surviving brother, is nowhere to be found. The crown sits firmly on Abimelech's head. The kingdom is quiet. But biblical history teaches a terrifying lesson about the quietness of God. The silence of God is rarely the approval of God. Sometimes, it is simply the space given before the harvest of what has been sown. Then, the text pivots. Judges chapter 9, verses 22 and 23, delivers a sudden, decisive shift. The passage says, "After Abimelech had governed Israel 3 years, God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the citizens of Shechem, who acted treacherously against him." Look carefully at how divine justice operates here. God does not open the earth to swallow Abimelech. He does not send an army of angels to strike the city. He does not even raise up a foreign nation to invade. He simply sends a spirit of division. The Hebrew word here is ruach, which can mean spirit, breath, or wind. God breathes a bitter wind of discord between the king and the men who crowned him. The alliance begins to fracture from the inside out. But the text does not just tell us what happened. It tells us exactly why it happened. Verse 24 says, "God did this in order that the crime against Jerub-Baal's 70 sons, the shedding of their blood, might be avenged on their brother Abimelech and on the citizens of Shechem, who had helped him murder his brothers." This is a profound biblical pattern. God does not view the murders at the stone as the solitary crime of one bad man. The men of Shechem are equally guilty. They provided the funding. They provided the political cover. They rejoiced in the outcome. When an alliance is built on innocent blood, it does not require a lightning bolt to destroy it. It only requires time. God often judges human ambition by simply giving it exactly what it wants and then removing his hand of restraint. He allows the sin to run its natural, destructive course. The city and the king are tied together in blood, guilt, and now they will destroy each other. The citizens of Shechem begin to betray Abimelech. They start setting ambushes on the hilltops. They rob travelers passing through the region. This is not just petty theft on the outskirts of town. It is an intentional act of economic sabotage. They are destabilizing the region, destroying trade routes, and deliberately undermining the king's authority. They want to make Abimelech look weak and incompetent. The men of Shechem had chosen a violent man because they thought his violence would serve them. They thought they could control the bramble, but treachery always turns inward. The same leaders who went into the temple of a false god to fund his rise to power are now actively plotting his downfall. Jotham's prophecy is no longer just a story. The warning spoken from the top of the mountain 3 years earlier is waking up. The bramble and the trees are turning on each other. The men of Shechem think they have the upper hand. They believe they can slowly choke out the king they created. But they have severely underestimated the man they crowned. They wanted a ruthless mercenary to protect their interests. And a ruthless mercenary is exactly what they got. Abimelech is not a statesman. He is not going to negotiate. He is going to respond the only way he knows how. The trap is set. The city leaders are confident in their rebellion, but Abimelech is preparing a retaliation so devastating it will leave Shechem in ruins. The illusion of peace is over. The fire of the bramble is about to start. The leaders of Shechem place their confidence in a new mercenary named Gal. They throw a harvest festival, drink the wine from their vineyards, and openly curse Abimelech. They believe a change of military leadership will save them from the king they created. They are wrong. Abimelech is a master of violence. He sets an ambush by night. When Gal marches out of the city gates in the morning, Abimelech's forces crush him. The rebellion in the field is broken instantly. But for Abimelech, defeating the army is not enough. He does not just want victory, he wants annihilation. The next day, the ordinary citizens of Shechem go out into the fields. Perhaps they think the worst of the battle is over, or perhaps they are just desperately trying to tend their crops. Abimelech does not care. He divides his men into 3 companies, waits in the fields, and massacres the people as they come out. Then, he turns his full rage against the city itself. Judges chapter 9 tells us he fought against the city all that day. He captured it. He slaughtered everyone inside. He tore down the walls. And then, the text adds a chilling detail. He sowed the city with salt. In the ancient Near East, salting a conquered city was not a military tactic. It was a ritual curse. It was a permanent declaration of ruin, symbolizing that the ground should be barren forever, that life should never grow there again. The very city that gave him his start, the city of his mother's family, the city that funded his rise to power, is now a salted wasteland. But the violence is still not finished. When the leaders who were in the surrounding region hear that Shechem has fallen, they realize they have nowhere left to hide. So they retreat to the strongest, most secure place they know. 1,000 men and women lock themselves inside the stronghold of the Temple of El-Berith. Notice the tragic irony of the location. This is the exact same temple that gave Abimelech 70 pieces of silver 3 years earlier. The silver that bought his mercenary army. The silver that funded the slaughter of his 70 brothers on one stone. The people are now seeking refuge in the very sanctuary of the false god that created their nightmare. When Abimelech hears they are trapped inside the temple, he does not try to break down the doors. He leads his men up to Mount Zalmon. He takes an axe, cuts down some branches, and hoists them onto his shoulder. He tells his men, "What you have seen me do, do quickly yourselves." The entire army cuts down branches. They march back down to the stronghold. They pile the dead timber against the walls of the temple, and they set it on fire. 1,000 men and women perish in the flames. Pause and remember what Jotham shouted from the mountain 3 years earlier. If you anoint the bramble as king, let fire come out of the bramble and consume you. It was not just a poetic story. It was an exact, literal blueprint of the destructive nature of ungodly power. The people wanted a dangerous, thorny weed to rule over them. And now, the weed has burned them alive. The fire of the bramble has consumed the leaders of Shechem. Abimelech stands in the ashes of the city. He has survived the betrayal. He has crushed his enemies. He has salted their land. By all human appearances, the self-made king is victorious. But his obsession with total domination cannot be turned off. There is one more rebellious town nearby, a town called Thebez. Abimelech marches his army there to burn it down too. He does not know it, but he is marching directly toward a final, fatal wall. Abimelech leaves the ashes of Shechem and marches to a nearby town called Thebez. Thebez has also rebelled against his rule, and the king is determined to make another violent example out of them. He captures the outer city quickly, but the leaders and the citizens flee to a strong tower in the center of the town. They lock the heavy doors and climb to the roof. Abimelech has seen this exact scenario before. Just a few days earlier, he burned 1,000 people alive in a stronghold. He knows exactly what to do. The text tells us he approaches the door of the tower to set it on fire. He is confident. He is the Bramble King, and fire is his signature weapon. He stands at the door, ready to deliver another devastating blow and watch the city burn. But the fire never starts. Judges chapter 9, verse 53, records one of the most sudden, unglamorous deaths in biblical history. It says, "But a certain woman dropped an upper millstone on Abimelech's head and cracked his skull." Pause and look at what just happened. Abimelech has spent his entire life obsessing over power, status, and public perception. He slaughtered his 70 brothers to secure a throne. He hired a mercenary army to project dominance. He crushed cities to prove his absolute authority. And his reign is ended in a single second by an unnamed woman standing on a roof. She does not use a sword. She does not use a spear. She uses an upper millstone. In the ancient world, a millstone was an ordinary domestic tool. Every household had one. It was used daily to grind grain into flour for bread, a task almost entirely done by women. The upper stone was heavy, usually about 10 to 14 inches across, but it was not a weapon of war. It was an instrument of ordinary, life-giving work. The man who produced nothing but thorns and fire is struck down by a tool designed to make bread. The irony is staggering. Abimelech falls to the ground. His skull is fractured. He knows the wound is fatal, but even in his final, dying moments, his pride is still fully intact. The man who lived his whole life trying to manufacture a name for himself makes one last, desperate attempt to control his legacy. He urgently calls to his armor-bearer. He says, "Draw your sword and kill me, so that they cannot say, 'A woman killed him.'" He cannot stand the thought of being remembered as a king who was defeated by a civilian woman dropping a kitchen tool. He wants to die by a soldier's blade. He wants to curate his own legend. He wants it to look like a warrior's death. So, the young armor-bearer runs him through, and the Bramble King dies. He lived like a false king, and he died trying to stage a false death. But human ambition cannot edit divine history. Abimelech's final attempt to rewrite his own ending completely fails. The biblical text records the exact, humiliating truth. And decades later, in the book of 2 Samuel, when the commander of King David's army needs an example of a foolish military mistake, he points directly back to this moment. He says, "Who killed Abimelech? Didn't a woman throw an upper millstone on him from the wall?" The legacy he killed 70 men to build is reduced to a cautionary tale about standing too close to a wall. But there is something much deeper happening here than just a poetic battlefield defeat. The way Abimelech dies is not a random accident. The weapon that falls from the sky is not just a coincidence. The fact that his skull was crushed by a heavy stone is the exact completion of a biblical law of justice. A law that was set in motion years earlier on a different stone in his father's hometown. The irony of Abimelech's death is not just a tragic battlefield accident. It is the careful architecture of divine justice. To see it clearly, we have to put two stones side by side. Years earlier, Abimelech began his reign of terror by bringing his 70 brothers to a single stone in Ophrah. He used that stone as an altar of violence, slaughtering his own blood to secure a crown that was never his to take. Now, his dark reign ends when a single stone falls from the sky and crushes his head. The blood spilled on the first stone is perfectly answered by the second. The book of Judges makes sure we do not miss this connection. Chapter 9 concludes with 2 verses that serve as the final verdict on the entire bloody saga. Verses 56 and 57 say, "Thus God repaid the wickedness that Abimelech had done to his father by murdering his 70 brothers. God also made the people of Shechem pay for all their wickedness. The curse of Jotham came upon them." Notice the language. God repaid the wickedness, but look at exactly how he repaid it. He did not introduce a new, arbitrary punishment. He simply allowed the natural consequences of their own rebellion to complete their circle. The men of Shechem wanted a ruthless mercenary to protect their political interests, and that same mercenary destroyed their city. They wanted a bramble to rule the forest, and the bramble burned them to ashes. They funded a massacre with 70 pieces of silver from the temple of a false god, and they ultimately died burning inside that exact same temple. The story of Abimelech is not just a historical footnote in the era of the Judges. It is a profound, terrifying portrait of human ambition. It shows us what happens when we try to manufacture what God has not promised. Gideon publicly refused the throne, but secretly wanted a dynasty, so he named his son, "My father is king." Abimelech wanted the reality of that name, so he bought a crown with silver and innocent lives. But the kingdom they built was an illusion. In the biblical story, true authority cannot be purchased. True leadership cannot be manufactured by manipulation, violence, or political alliances. When God raises up a leader, he provides his spirit. When a man raises himself up, he only brings fire. The contrast that Jotham shouted from the mountain remains true throughout all of Scripture. The olive tree, the fig tree, and the vine produce quiet, life-giving fruit. They are a picture of godly people who do the deep, quiet, necessary work of the kingdom without demanding the spotlight. The bramble produces nothing but thorns, constantly demanding perfect submission and offering only destruction in return. And this dark story points us forward by showing us the exact opposite of the ultimate king of Israel. Centuries later, another king would arrive. But he would not hire mercenaries. He would not slaughter his rivals. He would not burn cities to the ground to secure his throne. Instead of sacrificing the people to save himself, he would sacrifice himself to save the people. He would not be crowned under a tree by corrupt politicians. He would be crowned with actual thorns on a Roman cross. And the stone that marked his story would not be a stone of execution. It would be a heavy stone rolled away from an empty tomb. The violent rise and sudden fall of Abimelech stands as a permanent biblical warning. Whenever we try to seize power, control, or status for ourselves, we only plant the seeds of our own ruin, because in the kingdom of God, true authority is never taken by force. It is only ever given by grace.